Welcome to High Stakes. I'm your host, Tracey Devlyn. On this show, I chat with authors about the moments in their stories that change everything, what's at stake, what it costs, and why we can't look away. From thrillers to romance to sci-fi and beyond. Let's get to it. Joining me today, all the way from Wales, is New York Times best-selling author Clare Mackintosh to talk about her new mystery, The Butler. Welcome to the show, Clare.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you here. I did happen to notice that on your social media that it looks like you just got back from Toronto. Did you have a fun whirlwind trip there?
I did, yes. I really love Canada and I went out for the Motive Crime and Mystery Festival. So it was just brilliant. Lots of other crime authors and always really interesting to hear what everyone's up to and obviously to meet readers. So I had a really great trip.
It looked like you had a wonderful time. I always enjoy when authors give us those behind the scene kind of glimpses of what your day's like, especially when you're doing something like that where you're maybe mixing a little bit of business, or I'm sorry, a little bit of pleasure in with your business, and so it's always kind of fun to see that side of the author's life. So thank you for sharing that. I know it's kind of hard to do that from time to time, but that's really a lot of fun. I was going to ask you kind of hopefully a fun question. Does Pete the goat miss you when you're gone?
I don't know. Do you know what? Pete lives, let me just set the scene a little bit.
Yes.
I've got a field behind my house, and at the end of that field is a little path, little footpath. And so lots of passers-by come and see Pete, and he's quite a local celebrity. So kids after school come and say hi. Childminders take their charges to give him bits of carrot or dandelion leaves. So he has lots of visitors. And I always have house sitters when I'm away. So he's quite well looked after. So actually, sometimes I think maybe when I get back, he sort of thinks, oh, it's you again, you know?
He doesn't get all those little extra treats and
Yeah.
things like that that he might normally get, right?
Yeah, but he's a sweetheart and he's easier to look after than the teenagers. So
Oh, that's great. And I think I saw on your website that he came to you in kind of an unusual way. I don't know if you want to talk about that or not.
yeah, I mean, I didn't set out to have a goat, but for about 10 years ago, a friend was moving from country to town and couldn't keep her goat. And he was very young then and quite small and quite cute. He's still very cute, but he's a bit bigger.
Yes, yes.
And, you know, I had a field and lots of hedges, and goats are very good at looking after hedges. So I said, sure, I'll take your goat and her chickens. We don't have chickens anymore, but we still have Pete, and he's just a joy. He's
Oh,
lovely, and
good.
he's got this lovely beard. And um, my daughter keeps asking to let him in the house, and I said absolutely not. However, it did occur to me that maybe he might come in just for maybe a special unboxing next time I get a delivery of books.
Oh, that would be fun. That'll get you a few likes, I'm sure. Absolutely. A few extra, I should say, a few extra likes. All right. Well, before we dive into the butler, could you, besides having a pet goat and having teenagers, it sounds like, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, please?
Well, so probably the most significant thing about me that's relevant to readers is that I was a police officer for 12 years. And so obviously, in terms of writing crime, that's quite helpful. So I've got firsthand experience of being at the scenes of lots of different types of crimes and talking to people who may or may not be telling me the truth. All of that is very useful in my writing. But I left the police in, gosh, 2011, and I've pretty much been a full-time writer ever since. My first novel, I Let You Go, came out in 2015 and changed my life. It went into the Sunday Times and the New York Times top 10. It sold 1 million copies in 40 different languages.
Amazing.
And ever since then, I've been just writing thrillers and traveling the world and enjoying meeting readers and other writers.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I saw that you became a police officer quite accidentally, and I'm hoping you'll share that story with us. And then also, well, go ahead and share the story, and I'll ask my
Okay.
follow-up question if you.
Well, so I mean, now I'm telling you all these stories about how I spontaneously do things like get goats and join the police. And we will discover perhaps when we talk about how I write that that is not my approach to writing. So I was at university and didn't know what I wanted to do for a living afterwards. And I, out of sort of curiosity, went along to a lecture about becoming a management consultant, a business consultant. I thought, that sounded like quite a cool job, but I was late and I couldn't find the room. And by the time I got there, the lecture had started. And when I sat down, I was in the wrong room. And it was a lecture being given by the Home Office on joining the UK police force. And because I'm British and very awkward and don't like to make a scene, I was too embarrassed to leave. And so instead I had a 12-year career in the police.
Now, do you think that kind of chance, accidental, walking into the wrong seminar and then becoming a police officer, do you think that you would have ever taken that step to becoming a crime novelist? I know books have been a big part of your life, since you were small, but do you think you would have taken that step as far as being a crime novelist, or do you think, you would have stayed with that path that you were on? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That sort of sliding doors
Yeah.
effect. Uh, I I suspect I might have come to it eventually, but I don't know. There are lots of moments in my life that have turned out to be a catalyst for what came next, even
Mm,
if at the time it came out of the blue.
yeah.
So, for example, that although joining the police was a bit of an accident, it sort of brought together a couple of things that I had been thinking about. So I was struggling a little bit with the idea of doing a job that was just about making money. So that was a
Mm,
kind of little niggle at the back of my mind. I was struggling with the idea of a job that was just going to be the same day in, day out for years. And one of the reasons I'd thought about management consultancy is because they go into lots of different places. Um, and those two things, oddly, really fit with the
yeah.
police because you are doing lots of different jobs all the time and you're making a difference. But the other thing that the police gave me, which I didn't see really until afterwards, was that it is essentially about finding stories and telling stories. And that is something that I have loved forever and a day from the books that I
Yeah.
read when I was a kid. And coincidentally, they were mostly crime novels, Famous
Okay.
Five, Nancy Drew, Agatha
Yeah.
Christie. They were all mysteries. That love of storytelling I found during my business degree. I found it in marketing, in PR. I even found it in reading a balance sheet of a company because it's telling the story of
Mm.
what's happening in that company. And I certainly found it in leadership. And so all those skills of storytelling were sort of, they all fed into the police because as a detective, what you're doing is you are looking for the story. You're talking to all those
Hmm.
unreliable narrators. You're looking at the story that the forensics tell, the cameras, and you're weaving them together into a compelling narrative to put before an audience of a judge and jury. So all of that feels now, with the benefit of hindsight, as though it was building towards a career as a writer. But I never planned to leave the police. I never planned to start writing novels. I left the police because my work-life balance got totally out of whack. I had 3 children under 4 at the time. So I'd had 2 sets of twins in 15 months. And
Mm,
one of my sons, my first set of twins, my oldest son died when he was a baby. And so I'd gone back to work with this sort of maelstrom of emotions, grief, and new motherhood, and these 3 very small children. And just I needed to step off a bit. So I took a
yeah.
career break for a couple of years and I had to earn money. And I know in writing, you hear all the time, don't give up the day job. Well, I had given up the day job, and now writing became something that I felt I had to do to earn, I had to earn money. So
Yeah.
I wrote for magazines and newspapers, and I did a lot of corporate copywriting and social media content and a little bit of social media strategy for businesses. Just, a jobbing writer. And at the same time, I wrote I Let You Go. And in fact, just before my career break was due to finish, I got a 2-book deal, and so never went back.
It's amazing. That is um, those little, like you said, catalysts, or just those little pivots, those little turning points in our lives, how they lead to these really life-changing things,
Yeah, they do. They
and
do.
even,
And I,
I know we're kind of joking about you accidentally becoming a police officer, but honestly, if obviously crime uh, fiction was something that you enjoyed already, and then when you were in there and you were listening to this lecture, it obviously touched something deep in you. It's not like if you went to accidentally stepped into a water treatment workshop, you were gonna go work
no,
for those folks,
absolutely. Or
right?
sort of,
So
join the circus, or it absolutely did. It
yeah,
just triggered something. It felt right. And it's a little bit like, if you are viewing houses,
yeah,
you've sold your house, you're wanting to buy a house, or you're finding a place to rent. A house can be great on paper, but it has to feel yours. And people often talk about how they sort of stepped into the house and it felt like home. And
yes,
that is the sort of feeling that I had when I
hmm,
found that police career.
yeah,
Um, and I also don't think that I don't think I would have written a novel if my son hadn't died,
hmm,
because there's something really, I mean, obviously life changing about someone close to you dying. And my experience of both the personal grief, but also of talking to lots of people who have lived through bereavement, is that it often becomes a catalyst for a big change in your own life. And actually it's and the same is true of any kind of trauma, a serious
hmm,
illness or a redundancy, a retirement, a divorce. These big life changes often do a couple of things that encourage anyone who might think about being a writer. The first is that writing is very cathartic, and so expressing our emotions, whether we're writing a diary or we're seeing that through the filter of a character, is a really therapeutic process. And so I think it spurs us on to do that. But the second is this sort of seize the day, carpe diem attitude, where you are suddenly acutely aware of your own mortality. You have survived something. You've survived, because we're all survivors if we've experienced grief, or you've got out the other side of a divorce or whatever it is, and you think it's now or never. I am not wasting another moment. I am going to do
yeah,
the thing I've always dreamed about. And that's why often you see people, suddenly going off backpacking in South America, because it's just this, sod it, I'm going to do it. And I think that's how I felt, is that I had this great outpouring of feelings, but also impetus and this desire to make every second count, along with a kind of feeling of kind of doesn't matter if I fail, because
mm,
the worst thing that could possibly happen to me has already happened.
happened, yeah.
So, why not take some risks?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad, and many readers are very glad that you did take the risk. And I know that you had mentioned writing that book was cathartic and kind of helped you through a difficult time. And I am aware that you also, I guess, had the courage, I guess. I don't know if that's quite the right word, to write about grief in more depth. And you have a nonfiction book about the loss of your son as well. So folks, go check that out because that's amazing. And I don't know if you want to talk about, I know we're here for the Butler, but that's an amazing
Yeah,
book
well,
as well.
so I couldn't, thank you. I couldn't have written that book sort of then, it when
Yeah.
I was in the trenches of
Yeah.
grief. The only way I could write about grief was through fiction. It had to be happening to someone else, because I am one of those people, maybe less so now, but certainly then, one of those people who compartmentalizes their
Mm.
emotions. And I think being a police officer for so long really encouraged that, because you have to keep your own
Yeah.
emotions in check and move on to the next job. And so I sort of kept my grief boxed up, and I let it out through other characters, because it was kind of less painful that way. Um,
Hmm.
And I don't even think I was doing it I knew I was doing it at the time. It was quite a few
Yeah.
books in, and I read an interview or an article about me, about my books, and it said something like Mackintosh returns once again to the theme of grief. And I thought, well, what do you mean
Uh,
returns? I've hardly written about grief. And then I looked at my books, and in lots of different ways, the characters were dealing with some type
Interesting.
of loss.
Hmm.
Um, but it was about 7 years later, sort of after becoming a writer, that so it was 14 years after my son died that I wrote my memoir. I Promise It Won't Always Hurt Like
Yes.
This, which is really a sort of a conversation about grief, but specifically about the journey, about the recovery
Hmm.
from
Hmm.
grief. And it's been really wonderful to open up a dialogue with readers about that. And yes, of course, it's very, very different to writing fiction. But I think the common thread in all my books is authenticity, whether I
Hmm.
am giving you my own authentic thoughts about something like grief or my experiences, whether it's authenticity on my social media page, that is just me, or whether it's that feeling of authenticity that you are in a fictional world, but you can trust me that this is how an investigation pretty
Yeah.
much is carried out.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. So let's talk about The Butler. And I really, really enjoyed this story. It was great fun. And what can you share with us about it that's not spoilery?
Oh, I'm so fond of this book.
Yes.
Um, so it's, in fact, I'll tell you how it started, first
Okay,
of all,
good.
before I
Yeah.
tell you about the book itself. Because this is not a book I planned to write, I was on TikTok, doom scrolling. I mean, honestly, just wasting time on TikTok and flicking through all sorts of dances and hair tutorials as you do. And I stopped and saw a pair of white gloved hands putting what looked like very suspicious objects into a box. There was slightly mysterious music, and I thought, oh, this looks crimey. This is really exciting. And then the camera panned out, and it wasn't a box of sort of murder weapons at all. It was a butler. It was a butler putting together his butler kit to go on a job. And so he had his bottle opener and his cigar cutter and his collar stiffeners and all sorts. And I thought, oh, how interesting. And I'm always interested in how very rich people live, because it's
Yes.
not something I'm ever going to experience. And it's sort of, the whole Downton Abbey type thing I find incredible. And so I started watching his TikToks, and he is what's called a modern day butler. So essentially a private freelance butler who goes off to really beautiful, glamorous locations around the world and looks after real life, very, very rich people. And he was telling a story about a crime that had happened in the place where he was. And I'm not going to tell you what that crime is because I've stolen it for the butler. So you know what it is.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was a particular kind of mechanism that was pretty clever, I thought. And I thought, well, this is so interesting. I wonder if there's ever been a crime novel or a series. I could actually see the TV series of a sort of Poirot type figure, but modern day, and every season or every book off he goes to another kind of
Yeah.
White Lotus style location. And I love a locked room mystery. I love a closed cast. And I couldn't find anything, and I really wanted to read it, and I thought, well, maybe I'll write it. And so I messaged this guy, and he was lovely. Dan the Butler, his
Oh,
name is. You can follow him on TikTok and Instagram. And he was very kind and gave me his time over Zoom to just talk to me about life as a butler. And I was even more convinced by the end that I wanted to write something about a butler. And so I created Baxter, who is my butler. I wish he was my butler. And
Yes, me too.
this book, The Butler, is set in the south of France. It's set in Cannes, in a beautiful villa in the hills above Cannes. It's the week of Cannes Film Festival, and so of course, all the great and the good are there, all looking terribly glamorous. And Baxter has been hired to look after the people who are staying in this villa. And the sort of the host of this weekend is a guy called Alex, who has assembled his family, and we know from the outset that things are going to go horribly wrong. Well, we know it from page one, because
Yes,
see,
yeah.
there's a body in the pool, and then we rewind a little bit to find out what happened. But we know things are going to go wrong when Alex turns up with his very, very young girlfriend, and the next guest to arrive is his ex-wife, who doesn't know that the girlfriend's going to be there. We've got another son, we've got some affairs, I mean, it just, everyone has a motive to commit this particular murder. And Baxter's going to have to turn detective. And he does that with the help of an unlikely sidekick in the form of Red. So I hadn't created Red when I first started writing this story, and I had no intention of giving him a sidekick. He's perfectly capable of doing this on his own, and he's quite a he's quite a self-contained character, is Baxter.
Yeah.
But he was in Cannes shopping, picking up all these lovely, oysters and flowers, and he does these amazing tablescapes every day. And I suddenly realized that someone was about to pick his pocket. And I could see this girl with this red hair and kind of a, a bit like a sort of an urban fox, a little bit wild, a little bit wary, but really fun and energetic. And I could see her. I hadn't written anything. I could see her hand, like a camera watching
Yeah.
this hand go for
Yeah.
his wallet, and Baxter being seemingly totally oblivious and about to lose his wallet. And just as her hand closes on it, his hand closes on her wrist, because he does not miss a trick. So that's how we meet Red.
Yeah.
And she becomes an unlikely right-hand woman for him, which was really fun to write.
Yeah, and it was fun to read too. And it's so interesting. I really appreciate the setup that you gave, because I was going to ask, are these for hire or freelance butlers a thing? Because I had never heard of them or
Yeah.
about them before. And just the level of detail that you went into about his duties in a very organic way. I was like, a butler does that? I'm like, I'm so surprised that a butler would do tablescapes and things, things of that
Yeah.
nature. It's like the amount of service that they provide to these clients was just amazing. That his whole purpose is to make them happy and
Yeah.
comfortable in whatever way that is, and
Yeah.
individually too, not just as
Absolutely.
a
And sort of
group.
knowing everyone's cocktail preferences, and sort of preempting their every
Hmm.
need,
Yes. Yeah.
watching everything, seeing everything, hearing everything, saying nothing, keeping everyone's secrets, everyone's counsel. Dan, so real life butler Dan, always says he will be the last one to bed. He does not go to bed before the guests go to bed, and he is up before the first guest. Now,
Yeah.
that potentially means very, very little sleep. So he
Yeah.
lives and breathes those jobs, as does Baxter. And he'll take breaks. He won't go necessarily from job to job to job, although in fact, at the end of this one, he gets his next assignment and he flies off to a yacht in Santorini. So I'm not quite sure what awaits him there, but it's not going to be good.
Yeah. Well, you were mentioning Red, and she's a really fascinating character, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who fell in love with Red. And so yeah, I don't know, I don't want to say too much because it could lead into spoilers, but I hope that we see both of these characters again soon. You've set it up obviously that's the case for Baxter, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm
I
hoping.
absolutely have, and I I've got there's so many places I want to take them. And in fact, I was just in the car. I had a long, a 4 hour drive just now. And I was thinking about Baxter and where he is. And, so I know he's in Santorini at the moment. I don't really know what's happening yet, because I'm busy with other projects. But then I want him in in an Arabian tent in the desert.
Ah,
I think that would be a great place to look after people. And also I was at I did some after dinner speaking last night, and at my table I was talking to a lovely woman who lives in a village and organizes something she calls a safari supper. So
ah,
people basically go all around the village to different people's houses, and they have canapes, and then they have a starter, and then they move on and they have a main. And she was telling me this, just about how lovely her village is. And because I'm a crime writer, I was
yeah.
thinking, I mean, that's a murder setup, isn't it?
Oh,
That is
yeah. Yeah,
someone's getting
absolutely.
poisoned from that. And what a brilliant place to put a butler in. And so I'm sort of thinking maybe Baxter might come to the UK. He might, I feel like the Cotswolds might be a good
Yeah.
place for
Oh,
that type
yeah.
of
Very atmospheric.
place. And he's got some personal history back in the UK. So at some point in
Yes.
maybe,
Yes.
maybe book three,
Yeah.
I think he might be confronting that.
That broke my heart, I have to say. You let us know a little bit about that history in the book, and that was really it was just very touching. I love Baxter all the more because of it. So yeah,
I
I
didn't
hope
know.
something happens good
Um,
for him
I
later in the
hope so
books.
too. I'm sure it will, because good things happen to good people, don't they?
Yeah,
And
true.
it's odd, Tracy, because I normally when I write my novels, I know pretty much everything before I start.
Okay.
Not just in terms of the plot, but in terms of the characters. Uh, and the interesting thing about writing this, and I think actually this is perhaps the hallmark of something that is set up as a series, because they tend to be so character focused. I I found myself getting to know Baxter as I wrote, and that
Yeah.
particular moment that I know you're referring to, where we sort of learn a bit more, I did not know was going to happen. So I knew he was so he's washing up the beautiful crystal glasses, and he's
Yeah.
kind of reminiscing, and he's thinking about the where he was before. And in my sort of rough plan, he was just really thinking about that job. And then I just suddenly saw something that had happened,
Yeah.
a moment that had been incredibly beautiful but then heartbreaking,
Oh, yeah.
and yeah, poor Baxter.
I know, I know. And it's so interesting both with that and with Red that like you said you know your story very well before you start writing it is that both of those were even as a reader very unexpected and delightful that I guess that they came to you just very organically like that. That's great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, on this show, we like to talk about the story stakes. I always joke love, death, and the fate of the realm are all high stakes in a story. But what I'd like to hear your thoughts on what's personally at stake for Baxter in this book if he doesn't succeed.
So I think there are a couple of things. Firstly, he is in a slightly precarious state in terms of his career, because he's actually always been a live-in butler. So
Hmm.
the more traditional butler, where he's attached to a household, and he's got a team around him. And for reasons that we won't talk about, he had to leave that employment very abruptly, with a kind of potentially bad reference hanging over him. It's all a little bit murky.
Hmm.
And because of that, he suddenly has very limited choice in the jobs that he does. And so he is currently working for an agency, and the agency is sending him to all these different places. So he is a little bit under pressure now to do as he's told. He's effectively, although he's still freelance, he kind of has a boss again, because he's,
Yeah.
working for an agency. So he's got to go where he's told. We haven't met her exactly, but we've heard her on the phone. the woman who runs this agency, and she doesn't seem to have particularly strong morals. So I
Yeah.
think that's something, so she actually wants him to do a bit of spying for her on the host, which is very much against Baxter's principles. So he's in a tricky situation. But I think also more more than that are his sort of personal stakes, that he needs he needs to form some attachments. He needs to sort of build needs to build a family in whatever form that takes. And at the moment, he is sort of moving from place to place to place and very deliberately not doing that. So that's kind of what he's working through. Uh, if he doesn't solve this particular murder, is it going to matter hugely to him? I think it would matter because he might not get another job, or the finger of suspicion might fall on him. So there's that type of
Hmm.
thing. But for Baxter, this is definitely more of a kind of personal quest to find out who's done it. He's got a very strong moral compass, and so it's important to him that he
Yeah.
solves the crime.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's a one point where suspicion might be on some folks that he cares about too. So, right? So he probably wants to figure out who did this, who the murderer is, just to take the light off of them, I imagine
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely that. And I think probably it's important to him that he knows who he can trust.
Right.
And because that, trusting your team is absolutely fundamental to his job. And he works with lots of different people, but if he goes off somewhere, when he goes to wherever he goes in the desert to this Arabian tent, he will be assembling his team. So he is going to go through his little black book of chefs and housekeepers and what have you, to make sure that he's got a trusted team. So in the case of the chef and the housekeeper in the butler, who start to look like, can we actually trust them? That's a real personal betrayal for him, because
Right.
he needs to rely on them. But he's already had those instincts flipped a bit, because he didn't trust Red, and then actually he came to rely on her. So there's a lot about perception, I suppose, and maybe allowing yourself to be challenged a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll switch gears just a little bit for the last couple of questions here. Just go behind the scenes to get to know you a little bit better. Uh, Through your own hard work, you've enjoyed an incredibly successful writing career, as you touched on a little earlier. Is there a moment where you think back and wonder, did that really happen to me?
There are so many. I don't think we have time
Yeah,
on your podcast to go through them all. And you know what? Sometimes they're big moments. The New York Times. I mean, what
yeah.
an incredible thing to happen. But sometimes it's little things. I remember being in a bookshop in Greece, maybe, or Spain, and seeing my name
Mm,
on a book there. In a book in a language I couldn't speak, and these were characters that had existed in my head, and that sort of thing blows my mind.
yeah.
Some of the literary festivals, the speaking gigs, appearances I've been on the Queen Mary 2. I spent a week working with inmates in Dubai men's prison.
Wow.
I went to Buckingham Palace. I mean, just extraordinary
Yeah,
experiences that are only possible because I make up stories and people like them enough to buy them. And that's it. Yeah, it blows my mind. I feel
yeah,
incredibly lucky to do this job.
yeah. That's great. That's wonderful. What is one thing that readers might be surprised to learn about you?
So open on my social media. I'm not sure they'll be
Yeah.
surprised by anything. I think anyone who's listening to this podcast and heard heard me talk about my spontaneous joining the police and getting goats might think that I just make all my stories up. And the way I've talked about the butler, sort of, things just happening. But with my what I sort of call my core thrillers, because the Butler is a novella, so it's about half the length of my full books. So with my core books, I plan everything out. I plot absolutely everything in forensic detail. I've got whiteboards on the wall with photographs of characters and red string joining them all, like a murder wall. I don't write a word until absolutely everything is locked down. So that's slightly at odds with other bits of my personality. What else is surprising about me? No, I think I'm an open book, Tracey. I do.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love that. That's great. So, what is your favorite thing to do when you finish a book? How do you celebrate or treat yourself, or do you?
I do treat myself.
Good.
I reward myself all the way through writing. So I'm the sort of person, I basically need a sticker chart or, a gold star or something. And my equivalent of a sticker chart varies with each book. So right now, in fact, I'll show you. Hang
Oh,
on.
great.
Get it. So right now, every time I finish a chapter, I get to build some Lego. Hang on, let me hold it out. My
Oh my
Lego
gosh,
tray,
that's great.
and I'll show you what I'm building. So I'm only allowed to do a couple of pages with each chapter. Let me see so this is what I'm building. Oh, it's better on
Oh
that
my
one.
gosh.
This is what I'm building. It is a pop-up book made out of
Ah,
Lego. Um,
that's amazing.
and
Fun.
so that's my incentive. And so every time
Yeah.
I've done my writing session, I get to build a little bit more. And then other times I buy advent calendars, but I don't use them at Christmas. I open a door every time I
Great.
do a chapter, and I
Uh,
have a chocolate or light a candle or have a little gin and tonic or whatever it is. So that's kind of how I keep myself motivated. And then at the end, I always have a bottle of champagne because
oh,
I am
wonderful.
a diva.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. There's been so many times where authors they don't really do anything to kind of celebrate this huge accomplishment, and I'm like, oh, just go out for dinner, just do something to
Oh,
highlight the moment,
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So every time a book is published, in publication week, I buy a piece of art.
Oh,
So
nice.
now it's not always an
Yeah,
incredibly sort of, precious piece of art.
yeah,
I occasionally I've bought a couple of very lovely original paintings. Often it's just a print or, just whatever it is that speaks to me.
yeah.
Sometimes it relates to the book. Other times it's just something I love. But as I walk around my house, I know which piece of art is attached to each book, and that is my
Okay.
sort of my my present to
Mm,
myself to mark this achievement.
wonderful. That's great. Now you need to do a master class on how to treat yourself
On
on it. I'd
rewarding.
love it. Yes, on rewarding, absolutely. All right. Well, before we go, can you share what's coming up next?
If I can. I mean, there are lots of things on the go. Okay. So right now I'm doing lots with the butler, and I'm plotting Baxter's return. I am on the road in the UK with the book behind me, which looks like this in the UK.
Yes.
It's not what you think. And that is what's coming next in the US,
Okay.
because that comes out in September in the US.
Wonderful.
And that's a big standalone, big twist thriller. And I'm hard at work on another standalone thriller that will come out in 2027. So
All
busy,
right.
busy.
You are busy, busy, but that's a good kind of busy, isn't it? All
Yeah.
right. Well, folks, be sure to order your copy of The Butler today. You can learn more about Claire by visiting her website at claremackintosh.com, where you'll find all of her social media links, and be sure to sign up for her newsletter while you're there. Claire, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today. This was great fun.
I loved it. Thank you.
That's it for today's high stakes story. Follow the show so the next episode lands right in your feed. And if you enjoyed today's chat, A quick rating or review helps new listeners find us. Visit tracydevlyn.com/podcast for show notes and links to today's amazing guest and their fabulous book. High Stakes is a proud member of the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. Thanks for listening. Until next time, enjoy the adventure, everyone.